Hello, everybody. Oh, 1 second. Can everybody hear me? It was telling me I'm muted, but I actually don't think I am. Just gonna let a couple more people join here if they want. If I am muted though, let me know. Use the question and answer box. I have been having some technical difficulties with my mic, which is kind of why we started a couple minutes late here, but just go ahead and let me know if you can hear me. Okay, I'm guessing everybody can hear me okay. If you can't for whatever reason, just throw something in the Q&A and I will try to fix it as soon as possible. So welcome everybody to Behind the Lens. New folks here, I'm gonna give you a little bit of an intro. If this is your second time back or your first time back, this part might sound a little bit familiar to you, but just stick with me and we'll get to the good stuff in a sec. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Cool. Just wanted to bring the little presentation up, that's all. So maybe you're brand new to the game. Maybe you just do this for fun. Maybe you're experienced, but you're looking for new advice and some fresh takes. This class is for you. A little disclaimer, everything that I talk about comes from my personal opinions and experiences, so it's not like a final say on how to do music photography. There's so many different paths you can take. Mine just happens to be one journey, but there's a different style for everyone and how you can actually get in and really do this career. So for this class in particular, I've been looking forward to it, ever since the beginning of the series. You'll want a basic understanding of how to use your camera and some editing software, but I'm also going to talk about like scenario specific camera settings. So we'll get into all of that today. And then I did just want to go ahead and reintroduce myself. If you are new here, I think I see some new names in the chat. I'm Sarah, professionally Sar Takes Pics is my Instagram handle. A little bit about my personal credentials. I do a lot of work with LP Giobbi. You might know her through FemHouse. I've done 2 North American tours with her. And Bad Snacks, who's also, done a lot of stuff with FemHouse and a few other artists. I'm also the social media manager for FemHouse and LP's record label, Yes, Yes, Yes. I live in Portland, Oregon. I just moved here, so if you are returning to this class, my background might look a little different. It's because I'm in my new office. Um, and yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in visual communication from the University of Oregon, and I've essentially been doing photo as a career my entire life. So I'm really excited to sort of share the tips and tricks and what I've picked up along the way and just help all of you guys really, make this journey what you want it to be. And yeah, just a little reminder, because I also need to remind myself sometimes to check it. This is a little bit quirky of a format. We have a question and answer box instead of a direct chat line to me. So go ahead and just use that Q&A box at any moment of time if you have a question. And when I take a pause or a break or a sip of water or whatever, I'll remember to check it and I'll get to your guys' questions and we can sort of, communicate back and forth that way. I just wanted to take a look at our course outline so we can sort of retrace our steps, see where we've been. Um, in the months prior, we covered Music Photography 101. I talked about how to get your foot in the door. And then in class number 2, we went really into the nitty-gritty of actually being on the scene, shooting all access, shooting on a press pass, the etiquette and the workflow of when you're actually in motion. And if you need to catch up on those, I believe they're all on FemHouse's YouTube, so you can go check those out. And then today we're doing gadgets, gear, and other things to make your life easier. So that's going to be camera tips and tricks, my gear recommendations, must-haves, fun little toys and things like that to just really improve the experience of photographing music for you. And then at the end here, if we have time, we'll do a little editing software demo. And I'm going to go ahead and just remind myself right now to put in the chat the raw photos that we're going to be editing, because if you have slow Wi-Fi, these might take a while to download, so they might not actually be ready. Let's see if I can do this here. I don't know if you guys can see this necessarily. It might be just for the hosts and panelists here. Here's what I'll do. I will put on my screen the link when it's time to download them, and then you guys can copy and paste it from there, hopefully. And sorry about that. It's a Zoom webinar is a little tricky where I feel like I don't know, I can't directly communicate with everybody in the chat. So trying to put the link to the raw photos here, and I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll move on. We're not getting to that for maybe at least not for the first half of the class. So it's all good. So yeah, now we're here. We're at gadgets, gear, and other things to make your life easier. And then the next class will be focusing forward, and that's really going to look at the career breakdown and explore the different avenues of like, okay, now you've shot a few shows, you shot a lot of shows. Where do you want to go from here? How do you want to turn this into your career? And we can talk about all the different avenues that you go down. But for today, it's gadget, gear, and other things to make your life easier. So this right here is a photo of my Pelican case, which is a hard gear case that I use to travel with all my photo gear. Essentially that is my entire life, your entire life as a photographer packed into a box that fits in a carry-on size container. So what I've done today is I've pulled a bunch of stuff out of my case, and I'm essentially gonna pull it up on this screen and just talk about it in live time. And then, I'm gonna recommend a lot of products here. I promise you, none of them are ads. I'm not sponsored by any brands. I just really, really believe in the product and use it daily. A lot of this stuff you can find on Amazon, you can find in camera stores. They're just things that are really, like the title of the class says, going to make your life easier. So I have a list here, and the very, very, very first thing is earplugs. Earplugs, 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 earplugs. Nobody is too cool to not be wearing earplugs. You are cool if you wear earplugs. If you don't wear earplugs, you're going to start wearing earplugs. What's not cool is having a constant ringing in your ear all the time because you blew out your eardrums and give yourself permanent hearing loss. I'm young, I'm 27. My ears ring from time to time for not wearing earplugs really early on in my career. And I kick myself anytime I forget them, anytime I don't wear them. You just have to constantly remind yourself to bring earplugs. Get a few different pairs, keep them in all of your different camera bags. So no matter what situation you're in, you're always going to have earplugs on you. I was at Arc Music Festival 2 weekends ago photographing LPGOB, and I went up to my bag on stage and I opened this guy up and it was empty. And my ears were ringing for days after the set. Don't do that. that was an accident for sure. My heart was in it. I thought I had them on me, but I didn't. In a worst case scenario, and you don't have earplugs, venues a lot of times they have foam earplugs. Literally anything that you can shove in your ears to try to protect them. I have loops, which I used to have, I think, earpiece earplugs. There's a few different brands: earpiece, eargasm, loop. I'm sure there's a bunch others that I don't even know exist. but you'll see a lot of these like clear silicone earplugs, and those are meant to prevent quality loss while still like keeping your ears safe from sound. And then there's foam earplugs, which those are really just creating a barrier between the sound and your ear. You can't hear anything, but the sound also can't hurt you either. So there's always foam earplugs if you forget, but really, really important. Should always be at the top of your list. The next thing I wanted to talk about was UV filters. And especially if you're newer to photography, you might not know exactly what a UV filter is or does. So you'll see my lens here. And I hope the video on me is showing up for everybody. But you can see my lens here. If I unscrew this piece a little bit more, this glass circle comes off, right? And now this is my lens, and this is the front element of the glass on my lens. So essentially what a UV filter, or what I use it for, and many photographers use it for, is protection. Yes, you are filtering out, UV rays from light and the sun and whatnot, but I don't necessarily own one of these for that purpose. I own this solely to protect my camera lens. Because if you're investing $500,000, $2,000 plus into lenses and gear, you want to protect it at all costs from any sort of accident to happen. And one time I took off my UV filter because I was, I think I was switching it back and forth. There's some different UV filters serve different purposes, which we can talk about right after this. But essentially what happened is I was too lazy to screw it back on. I threw my camera back in my bag. The lens cap popped off by accident, and my keys fell from the top pocket. They like slid down into the bottom, and they actually cut up the front of my lens through the fabric of the backpack. And so that was really unfortunate, and it ruined that lens. I bought a new one. Fortunately, I'm in a place where I can do that. But not everybody is. And, most people, including myself, when I first started, and even now, you save up for a really long time to buy your nice gear, right? And so you definitely want to keep it protected at any cost. Fingerprint smudges, scratches, whatever have you, it's going to hit the UV filter before it actually hits your lens. I used to shoot sports a lot, and when you shoot basketball, you sit down right on the court. And I remember some person next to me, they didn't have a UV filter on their lens, and they got a basketball straight to the lens, and it just completely shattered the whole thing. If they had that UV filter on, it probably would have broken the UV filter first and not the lens. I've dropped camera before, and that's exactly what happened. Is the UV filter shatters, your lens stays safe. So in terms of where you can get these, you can always find them on Amazon. They're pretty affordable. The higher up in price and quality you go, I think the less distortion you have from having another piece of glass in front of your lens. So this brand is called B&W. And for this size, they probably range about $80 to $100, which can be a lot for a piece of glass, but it's definitely less than having to buy a new lens. Something a little bit smaller and more affordable. Right here, this brand is called Hoya, and you can find this one on Amazon. Whew. It's just a little guy. It's a little tiny lens, but they're going to vary in price based on size, and obviously the quality of the glass. I think Hoya is a good middle brand where it's not super out of budget, it's not super expensive, but you're also not sacrificing too much quality there. So on the topic of UV filters, we also have FX filters. And I have a little separate slide just dedicated to talking about FX filters. A lot of concert photographers use these. Not often as common in the EDM world, and you will have your purists who say a good photo shouldn't have to rely on one of these, but obviously you can see how they can be used to really explore photography as an art form, and to how to have really creative an intentional composition with your photos. Yes, they can be used as a crutch to make something instantly visually more interesting, but they can also really be used to expand how you think about photographing and capturing a moment. And so in this pouch here, I have my UV filters, and this little guy is a star filter. Now I'm not sure, it's probably not going to show up on camera, and that's okay. But basically in the star filter, there's cross hatches going vertically and horizontally. And what this does is when a light hits it directly, it bends through those little grooves and it creates that star effect that you're seeing on that blue photo there. So that one was a 6-point star filter, and that's creating 6 points to the star. They make 4-point, 8-point. A good brand for those is called Prism Lens FX, but you can also just get, a standard, just type in star filter on Amazon. I'm sure it'll come up. The next thing that I use is a half of a kaleidoscope. And so you can see on the red image here of Annabelle England, only half of the photo has that kaleidoscope effect, right? So that's actually not cropped. It really is only applying to half of it, and it's very subtle. And so I really like to use this to fill blank space. I also like to use it, if you're photographing an artist and maybe they're playing a really early set, maybe they're a really small artist, and in any of these scenarios, the crowd may be pretty small or just not super dense. And if you're photographing for the artist, a lot of times, like, they're gonna want to have like the most hype pictures there. And putting a photo on your Instagram of maybe not that many people at your show isn't something that a lot of artists feel very inclined to do unless it's something really sick, like a major festival, a main stage set, whatever. And so what I'll do is I'll have this on my lens. I can actually kind of show you here how I set it up. So I have this on my lens, and the neat thing about this filter is you can rotate it for where you want it. But say you're looking at a horizontal landscape shot of a stage. If the stage is up here and the crowd is down here, what this is going to do is this is going to refract images of the crowd, and it's essentially going to like copy and paste people all over the place, and it's going to fill in those gaps, and it's going to make that image look a lot more interesting. It's going to make that crowd, like an optical illusion, look a lot fuller than it actually is. And so this can actually be really neat, not just like an artistic piece, but a tool to do a successful job. And I see we have a couple more people here, so if you're just joining us, I just wanted to remind everybody to use the Q&A feature so we can talk back and forth. I don't think you guys have direct access to the chat in the Zoom webinar format. So just remember to hit that Q&A. You don't have to wait for any moment. Just go ahead, and anytime you want to say something, throw it in there, and I'll try to get to it whenever I take a break, like I'm doing now. So that's FX filters, and I'm going to jump back just a little bit so we can keep talking about the other stuff. But in terms of, FX filters, I own the Star and the Kaleidoscope, but there's so many different ones. I think, if you follow, a lot of big concert photographers, one of the trends is like the halo effect, where it's sort of like a circle going around the subject. You can replicate that in Photoshop too. Actually, most of these you can replicate in Photoshop, which is really cool. But the effects filter, I think, is just a really nice hands-on way of being able to do that. Especially because when you're editing your image, it can get really overwhelming to decide like which ones you want to have stars, which ones you want to be a kaleidoscope. If I just put the filter on while I'm shooting, I know those are the images I'm gonna have. Quick water break. So now I want to talk about cleaning tools. And I know like some of this might sound like, like really nitty gritty or nerdy, but I swear to you, if you walk away from this class with at least one gadget on this list that you didn't own or know of before, I promise you everything on here is going to be a big help to you one day. So cleaning tools. Your camera will get dirty. switching lenses a lot, especially if you only have one camera instead of two. Concerts are dirty, they're dusty. People have drinks and sweat and spit flying around, anytime you take a lens off, you're leaving your sensor exposed to those particles in the air. But your sensor is also like the beating heart and the brain of your camera. You don't want to touch it, you don't want to mess with it. Like, even like the slightest pressure or your fingernail could scratch it, it's you want to make sure that you're leaving your sensor as pristine as possible and taking very good delicate care of it, which is hard to do in a chaotic environment like concerts. So this little guy is a dust rocket. It's literally shaped like a rocket ship, which I think is so cute. But you can Google dust rocket and they're really cheap and they come up. But essentially what these are used for is cleaning your sensor without having to touch it. So what I'm gonna do is, I have my camera here on my desk. What I'm gonna do is I'll show you. You don't want to leave your sensor exposed for too long, and ideally if you're doing this, you're doing it in as sterile as possible of an environment, like a room in your house, maybe not necessarily a dirty concert floor. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. I'm not gonna hold the camera on its back. Personally, I don't like doing this because I think the dust just kind of flies back into it, but I'll hold it maybe at a bit of an angle. And I'm just gonna find where the dust spots are, and I'm literally going to blow and just squeeze this guy, and it'll blow the dust particles out of there. And then I can put my lens back on. And as small as that is, like a detail that is, you might be shooting a show and then you look at your images and you see giant lines or specks of dust going across your photo, and now you're spending way longer than you need to in Photoshop trying to stamp all of those out. Or at least that's, you might not necessarily care that much to spend that much time on those photos, but at the end of the day, it's going to make your images cleaner, more professional. And so just making sure that you have the tools to do what you need to do if you are changing lens at a concert and you get dust in your sensor. Now it's showing up on all your pictures. What do? You pull this guy out, you're good to go. The next thing on our list here is a little flashlight. I got mine right here. I don't want to point at the camera. I don't know how well that's gonna go for us. But I have a little flashlight. These guys come in a pack of 2. You just have to Google search, I think it's like tactical flashlight. I made sure to get the kind with the clip so that I can clip it, to whatever gear that I have. But if you're in the EDM scene, especially, this guy right here is going to take a lot of the pressure off of trying to navigate your way through a crowd. So some etiquette with the flashlight is you're never going to shine it in anybody's eyes. You're never going to hold it outward like that. If you're walking through a crowd, and ravers hate light, they will scatter if they see it coming. If you are a raver, me too, I'm sorry. But that is how I get just enough attention for people to sort of, be taken out of the moment that they're in for just enough so I can get by them. Because I'm 5'4", so it's a lot for me to go into a main stage crowd and have to be like, excuse me, sorry, to every single person that I walk by. And so when I'm doing this, I'm always saying excuse me, I'm always saying sorry, but now I'm not having to like also tap on everybody and like get them to sort of, get their attention and move out of my way so I can get by them. So what I do is I hold it just like this, just pointed at my feet. This one has a couple different modes. It's got the the narky blinky mode. I'll usually just put it on the dim one or the bright one, depending on the situation. But this is just gonna catch light in their periphery just enough to snap people out of it, get their attention so you can get by. And it might seem a little extra, I'm obviously not going to whip this out at like a 200 capacity venue, but if you're at a festival, if it's dark, if the crowd is dense and you have to get from, the back of the crowd to the stage, and people are coming into the set, and you're, especially if you're little like me, this is going to be your lifesaver. This was recommended to a friend of mine, or what recommended to me by a friend of mine who's well over 6 foot. So, you know, if he's using that, I definitely should be at 5'4", right? So yeah, just flashlight, and then also, you know, looking through your bag if it's dark. Doesn't hurt to have one of these guys on you. The next thing is a camera bracket or mount. So you can see this guy here going around my camera is a camera bracket. And basically what this is it's an extra grip. You can put things on it. And then again, it's another layer of protection. So if my camera is dangling from my hip on a strap or a harness or whatever, and it hits something hard and it bonks it, it's going to scratch this bracket. It's not going to scratch my expensive camera. I can replace the bracket. I cannot replace the camera quite as easily. So it's another one of those things. But you can also add stuff and accessories to it. So the reason I got this one in the first place was so that I could have my flash, put my flash on here, and my mic on my camera at the same time. And I know it looks like a beast, but currently I only have one camera body. I used to have two. I sold my other one because I am on Sony now. It was a Canon. I didn't want to have to keep switching back and forth between a Canon and a Sony. So eventually I will get a second camera body, and I'll have one for the mic and one for the flash, but not everybody can afford two cameras, right? And so right now I have both of them on my camera because of this little bracket here. And you can use the bracket for a bunch of other things. You know, they make grips for it. So you can sort of like, if, you know, if your camera is really heavy, you can have like an external grip that you can like control your camera with. But the perk of having all of your like external equipment on one bracket, if you only have one camera, is that you're not wasting precious moments. You're not wasting time switching back and forth. So the problem that I was running into quite a bit was that if it was in a dark venue and I was shooting flash, okay, well now the DJ's playing a track that I need to get a video of. So I had to take the flash off. I had to put the mic on. I had to screw it in. I had to plug the mic in. I had to turn it on. I had to set it. By then, the thing that I'm trying to get a video of in the first place is done happening. So it was just a huge waste of time just trying to switch back and forth between flash and mic. I just, you know, I decided to get this little bracket so I could have both on there at once. And now all I have to do is switch back and forth between photo and video modes, which is way easier than having to literally play Tetris with the gear that is sitting on your camera. So that's that little bracket, one use for it. I talked about grips. I have just a basket off screen of all the goodies here. I talked about grips. So I had this one for a while. And this is like another thing too. Now I can hold your camera like that. It's good for video, you know, it's a bit more stable, I think, obviously, than trying to hold it upright like this. It's definitely a lot more stable, especially if you don't have wrist strength like me. I'm not using this guy as much anymore, but it is something nifty that you can have. I think the real thing that I appreciate about my camera bracket is right now I have this little piece screwed onto it. And let me see if I can find it in my pile here of things that I've prepared today. This is a camera clip by Peak Design. And what this does is I don't like to use a strap while I'm shooting. I think it just gets in the way. Most of the time I end up taking my camera off of the strap and then the strap just sits around my body. I don't like how the camera's just dangling. You can bonk stuff, you know. And so what I have, which actually right now, just a quick disclaimer, I'm missing a screw, so I can't demonstrate it fully to you until that new screw gets here in the mail. But essentially, this square is part of the kit that comes with this clip, and I can clip it to my backpack strap, a belt, my overalls, I guess, and you can literally have the camera clipped in there, hands-free, if it was, if I did have the screw to actually fully attach it right now. But you can kind of get the idea. It has a quick release on it. So essentially, whatever this is clipped to, now that's locked in and stable. You can see it's on the bottom of my camera. If I wanted to release, I push this button in and my camera can come right off of it. So what I do is I pair that with a utility vest. And this is more for like if you're photographing festivals. I wouldn't necessarily roll up to a small venue wearing some fully strapped like this, but I would put this on here. And what this does is this keeps all of my valuables. So my phone, my camera, my batteries, my, lens filters, whatever, all in front of me. Because as unfortunate as it is, theft is a real thing at festivals. Photographers get targeted all the time because we have something that's more expensive than a phone in our possession, right? Oftentimes we also have the phone. And so making sure that you're not a target, making sure that you have everything you need right in front of you at all times. So if you don't want to get one of these little vests, front carry bags, anti-theft backpacks, any of those, totally fine. This camera clip can clip to any backpack, strap, belt, whatever. I like to be a hands-free shooter, so that's why I recommend this. If you do landscape, outdoor, hiking, action stuff, I think it's really nice to just be able to have it on you hands-free all the time. And as soon as you need it, you can unclip it and jump right into action. So this is the camera clip by Peak Design. Again, not an ad. I just really believe in the product. So I'll take this guy off here just for a second. Because on the topic of camera mounts, another very, very, very small but underrated piece of gear is the Allen wrench. And I'm trying to find it on my desk. I have little pouches for everything. So my Allen wrench is in here. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm always in a situation where I need one. And then if I don't have one on me, I'm screwed. So, oh my God. If you've ever built IKEA furniture, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's those little hexagon wrenches. But basically I have one of these because most brackets, clips, other things, they're using an Allen wrench to be tightened. And what can happen is like, while your stuff might not self-tighten, it will automatically loosen over time. And you definitely don't want to be shooting and have your brackets start to fall apart on you. And so I just have my little Allen key, and what I can do is I can access all the different things. So if I need to loosen this, I can loosen it. If I need to tighten it, I can tighten it. Tripods, camera mounts, camera brackets, just so many different little bits and bobs and accessories that you might come across. They're going to use these little guys. So I just have one on a keychain and it stays clipped in my bag. So I'm not having like, if you've ever moved before, I'm going through a move right now. I have a ton of these in my house just because of all the IKEA furniture we're building. But at the end of the day, you don't need a ton of them. You really only need one. So I just try to, make sure that I'm not overpacking, which is funny considering I'm literally going through everything in my bag right now. um, we've kind of talked about the flash and the mic. I'm not going to go super in depth because then we're just going to spend a lot of time as a tutorial on how to use these things. I will recommend though the situations that they can be used for. If you're a press photographer, you're often going to hear no flash. So if you're only shooting press, you're not really going to have a use for this unless you're doing portraits, some backstage stuff. Maybe you get a photo pass that does allow for flash, and then that's great. This is more for artist and venue photographers because typically, unless your artist says otherwise, you're going to be able to use flash. So if I'm in a really, really dark venue, I'm going to be using this flash. there's also different like aesthetic things you can do with Flash, you know. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like those photos with like light paint and it looks like the light is kind of streaking across the screen, but your subject's in focus. That's done most of the time with the Flash. I have the newer Camera Flash, that's the brand. Godox is a really popular brand. This is essentially a dupe of that. It laid out exactly the same. I'm convinced it comes from the same factory. They just put a different label on it. But if you get a flash that is compatible with your camera, so I use a Sony, so you can see here it says Z2S for Sony. If you're on Canon, that's going to say C. If you're on Nikon, I'm guessing that's going to say N. If you get one that's compatible with your camera, what you can then do is you can have the flash talk to the camera and learn your camera settings and then adjust itself accordingly. And so you don't even really necessarily need to think about how to use your flash or have an extreme comprehension of lighting and scenarios. If you have a flash that's going to sync with your camera, you can kind of just let it do its thing. I would definitely, of course, read the manual so you can find out all the different things you can do. But generally, if you have a flash that's synced with your camera and you have a basic grasp of where the settings are, this number here, 1/256, that's the lowest exposure on the flash. The higher that I make that number, or I guess technically it's the lower I make the number, like if I bring that all the way up to 4, for example, that's going to be a very, very bright flash. But if you keep it really, if you keep it 1/256, 1/128, those are going to be dimmer flashes than 1/6, 1/8. Similar concept to, your shutter speed, right? The higher the number, the faster the speed, the darker the image. The lower the number, the slower the speed, the brighter the image. And the same goes with the flash. So these concepts are really transferable. It can also sync to your focal length of your lens. So it can produce a more or less intense flash depending on how zoomed in or out you are. And not just the intensity, but also the field of the flash as well. So that's the flash. And then if you don't do video, you don't have to worry about having a mic. Where'd mine go? But I do have an external shotgun mic. The two main brands I recommend are Zoom and Rode. And you can look into those. Admittedly, audio and video is not an area that I am extremely well versed in, so I don't want to give any misadvice. But I will say that, having a quality mic is going to make the difference in not clipping your audio, not having those low ends blow out, and just having good audio from your sets, especially if you are recording DJ sets. And I'm also happy to, help you guys do more research on finding a mic and using resources that I have professionally in my community for recommendations. If you guys just want to reach out to me on Instagram at StarTakesPics, we can pick out a good mic for you if you are looking for a recommendation. Back to the pouches. I feel so badass wearing this at a show, but in my own house, it's it's a little different. So we talked about the front pouch a little bit. We talked about clipping the camera to it. This guy is great for a lot of reasons. I can put all of my batteries in it. I can put my earplugs in it. And another thing that I absolutely do because phones are such a target at shows, is I put my phone inside and I have this little lanyard that clips to my phone. And you might call me a little extra for this, and that's okay, because I know it's extra, but I've never had my phone stolen. And I just clip it to myself here. So even if I'm changing lenses, I'm moving around a lot, maybe I lean over and this whole thing spills out, right? My phone's not going nowhere. It's attached to me. And like just the other day, I was photographing a show. I was in the photo pit and I had security come over to me and I was like, oh God, like what am I doing wrong? So I go up to him and I say, hey, is everything okay? And he's looking behind me and he's saying, oh, this girl right now is just all over you. Like she's trying to take your phone. And essentially what was happening is I was so focused on what was in front of me, trying to photograph, that I didn't even notice that people had their eyes on my pockets, right? But luckily everything was in my front. And so it is kind of an unfortunate aspect of concert photography, but if you know how to keep yourself protected, you know how to have a good eye on all of your belongings and take care of your gear, you're gonna have no problems. Because, you know, people can't get to what's right in front of you, what's on you, right? So that's this little guy. If I feel like this is too intense, I'll just have a sling bag that I keep on my front, which is maybe a little bit more, casual of a thing to have and store your gear in, because you can also put your lenses and your camera in it as well. Um, so the next thing is a pass holder. And now this one's kind of silly. Maybe it's not essential, but as you start photographing shows, you're going to learn that, you get photo passes a lot, which is like those little stickers. Usually, sometimes they're wristbands, a lot of times they're stickers. I'm a very sentimental person. I keep all of my photo passes. They're actually right behind me on a wall. Ooh, wrong one, in that frame there. Um, and I like to keep them and preserve them like a little scrapbook in the frame, right? And so I put them in this so they don't lose their stick, they don't get crumpled, whatever. But beyond being sentimental and just wanting to keep them for personal sake, I have had a few shows where the sticky is like, it will not stick to what I'm wearing. It just keeps peeling off. I have to keep going back and getting more of them. And like eventually, like I just like, it looks like kind of shady. It looks like I'm giving these away or something. And I'm just like, no, I swear, like it keeps coming off of me. It won't stick to me. So if you put it in one of these, you can clip it to this. You can clip it to your nifty little vest pouch. It's just a pass holder with a little lanyard. And that's just one of those things like where it's not necessarily essential, but it does get rid of a small annoyance and something that could, eventually be a damper on your shoot if you lose your pass. Security wants to, they won't might not let you in. So there's that. And then the last couple things, which I think are really, really relevant, because we're about to get into the fun part, which is the edit, are hard drives and SD cards. So if you're working with a mirrorless camera, or a DSLR camera, you're probably going to be shooting onto an SD card. And this might seem like a given, but certain SD cards are way better than others. So I use SanDisk. It's kind of like a consumer grade fast SD cards. There are other higher end cards out there. I find these to be really accessible and affordable. But my camera has a 48 megapixel sensor, which is really, really big. So my files are huge. And my raw files while I'm shooting can be, 40 megabytes plus, which is a lot to load onto a card. And so I get cards that are minimum 300 megabytes a second speed. And so that's going to make it so that if I'm shooting in a burst, like my camera is going to be able to keep up with it. If I shoot on something a little bit less, like right now, what I have in my hand is a 200 megabyte card, megabyte per second speed. The card itself is actually 256 gigs. But the slower the card, essentially, if I shoot in a burst, what ends up happening is I can maybe get to up to like 30 photos, and then I can't shoot anymore. And I have to wait for them to load onto the card, and it has to take time. And those are moments that I'm losing that I could be photographing up on stage. So again, recommend getting a fast card. If you're on a DSLR, you might be having the CFast, the QXD, or the CF format. Again, all of those already by default are usually much faster than an SD, so you're probably fine. But if you are using an SD card, I would say depending on your camera sensor size, something around 200 to 300 megabyte speed is going to be ideal. Now, those are more expensive of a card. So if you are, if you don't have that big of a sensor or a file size, then you probably have nothing to worry about. if you are shooting and you do run into the problem that your camera cannot keep up with the volume you're taking, that's how you know it's time to get a new card. So that leads me to external hard drives. This one is like a solid state disk, not actually a hard disk. Basically, it works off of flash instead of like hard physical data. Please don't ask me to get into the science of that. But never, ever, ever work off of or edit or store photos in your SD card. They're not meant for that. They're not meant to be an external working drive. You will ruin and corrupt your SD cards if you keep your photos on them as storage. And it's also annoying when you're trying to shoot and all of a sudden you can't because you have two other shoots on there that you now need to delete when you're in your camera, like trying to go through it one by one. Just format after every shoot and dump them all onto an external drive. And the last thing in terms of gadgets and gear specifically, again, is double check that you have earplugs. I cannot stress that enough. So I know it was like sort of like a big info dump. If anyone has any other like gear, little camera accessories, toys, whatever that you want to recommend, put them in the chat. I would love to shout them out, or the Q&A box rather. Otherwise, let me know any questions that any of you might have on that. I'm going to take a sip of water and then we're going to start the editing session. And I'm just going to be right back, maybe a minute or two while I set that up. Just kidding. I actually have one more little section that I wanted to talk about before we get into editing. That's my bad. I was just, like I said, I was really excited for the editing session. So still I'm gonna take my water though. Okay, so I jumped the gun a little bit. We're not gonna do the editing quite yet. We will get to it, I promise. Um, so typically, I'm trying to think about like where I want to start here, because this isn't going to be like a technical skills segment. Like this is under the understanding that you know how to use your camera at like in manual mode, if not at least time value or shutter value mode. But like mainly what I wanted to talk about here is the different like scenario based settings and like the principles behind them for music photography specifically. So as far as I'm sort of going to go into baseline technical skills overall outside of music, I just want to really quickly do refreshers on shutter, aperture, and ISO. Um, and if you already know all this, if everybody here already knows all this, just stick with me. We'll only talk about it for a couple minutes. But yeah, those are the big three settings when it comes to shooting manual. So, you know, your shutter, right, is the speed at which your shutter is letting light into the camera. So if you have a really, really fast shutter speed, 1/1000, 1/2000, whatever that might be, right, you're going to capture that action. These are my karate moves. Like frozen in time in the screen. The lower you bring that number down, the slower it gets, right? So 1/100, 1/50. Now you're at solid 1 second, right? Instead of a fraction of a second. That's when you're going to get those blurs. When you are, because the camera is seeing all of that light happening for as long as you're allowing the shutter to be open. And so what that's going to do is the slower the shutter, you know the principle, the brighter the exposure. The opposite is said for the faster the shutter. You capture that freeze frame moment in action, you're going to have a bit darker of an exposure because you're not letting your shutter be open for as long. Your aperture, on the other hand, is the opening of the lens that lets the light in, right? So I don't have enough hands to do this. But like, you know, a wide aperture, this lens, for example, is an f2. So it's going to be open wide at f2. but you can bring it all the way down to f22. And then you're looking through a pinhole in the lens. And so, a lot of the same principles apply across the board in music photography and just photography in general. That lower number, or I guess it's technically higher because they're fractions, but don't worry about math, I'm terrible at it. I only know camera math. The more wide open that f2 value is going to not only let more light in, but it's going to have allow you to have a really shallow depth of field. If you see those photos where the subject's in focus, but the background is this really like milky sort of just like, washed out blur, and it looks kind of dreamy and cool, that's going to be that depth of field. On the flip side, if you're shooting, landscape photographers, for example, will use a lot of like f16, f22. You're capturing everything in the subject, in the background, all of it in really crisp detail, but that then in turn is going to lower your exposure. So you use these things in tandem to sort of create the perfect exposure. And the last, function here, don't know how to talk, it's been a long day, is your ISO, which is your light sensitivity of your sensor. And so the higher the ISO, the more light in general you're allowing the camera to be sensitive to, but you're also going to have that what's called noise. And that's when you see a photo and it looks super, super grainy. Obviously, the lower the value, then the less light you're going to allow it to be sensitive to, the less noise, the less grain you'll have. And so the three of these in tandem is what's going to allow you to create that perfect exposure. But you don't necessarily need any of these three settings to be some golden standard, especially not in music photography, because there's so many different scenarios and settings that you're going to encounter where you're going to have to break your own rules and what you've been taught about these three values. One of those things being lasers, for example. Don't ask me the science of it, but a laser is not a solid beam of light. That is as much as I know. A laser is a traveling light. It is not solid as it appears in that picture. So if you have a really fast shutter, say 1/500, your lasers are going to look like pieces. It's not going to be that long line. It's going to be just like a little chunk or a little section of the line. And that's because you're capturing that laser as it's moving in time. And so typically if you shoot 1/60, that's slow enough to match the refresh rate on the laser so that you're capturing what appears to be a solid beam, even though it's not a solid beam. But if you have something faster, you're only going to capture pieces of it. And you could kind of see here too, like in this photo, it's not perfect. Like there are still, let me see if I can like go in here and analyze. There are still pieces on the end here where you can see where my mouse is, that it's not fully gone across the screen. But I've captured as much as that laser beam as I, could in that moment, right before it was gone. The other, scenario that you'll find a lot, especially in, rap as much as EDM, is pyro. That's the fire, that's the sparklers, the fireworks, what have you. You're gonna want to be shooting a lot darker on your f-stop for those. We're talking anywhere from f8 to f11 higher, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to see the plumes and the details and the flames. So you can see this image here of Travis Scott in front of these flames. Those flames are actually pretty blown out. It's because I did not shoot them at the f-stop needed to really show you a detailed flame. I personally, the way that I shoot, I don't think it's super, super important, but if you are a stickler for a well-exposed shot and you want to impress all your friends with a really, really sick, perfect pyro shot, those higher f-stops are what you're going to be looking at. And then in dark venues, again, yes, you're going to want to have your shutter speed faster if it's a more action-packed show, So you might not be able to have the liberty of shooting right here. I have 1/125. You might not have the liberty of being able to do that, especially if your subject is moving super fast. But if you are able to do that, that's really going to help you a lot. Because I typically don't like to push my ISO very high. I don't like to have a lot of grain right off the bat when I'm editing. I try to keep that number as low as possible, but that means I then have to compensate with my shutter speed. Typically, when I'm shooting, unless there's pyro, I will have my aperture as wide open as possible. Because in concert photography, you're doing so much low light. And so having those wide open lenses, those 2.8, 1.8 lenses, it's really going to set you up for success when you go to shoot a show, because you're not handicapped right off the bat by having an f4 and f point, 5.6. You're going to really just be able to focus on pairing your shutter speed and your ISO, unless you have situational things like the pyro hits, for example. Okay, I just want to let everybody put in the Q&A box if they have a question on this. Go ahead and throw it in there before we get to the editing session. Now I'm going to take a quick little water break. I'm going to go off camera just so I can sort of switch gears around and set up my new screen recording for the editing session. So we'll take maybe like a 2-minute break, and then I'll come back and we can get to the fun part. Okay, guys, so I just put in the chat, and I'm gonna pull it up on screen sharing really quick for the editing demo. If you're with us right now, um, it's in the chat. I have a link to the raw photo download. So there's some sample images there that I've taken. These are my raw photos. Please treat them with respect and care. If you're an experienced photographer, you know that the raw photo is everything to us. That is our baby. That's what we protect in terms of usage rights. So please just use these personally on your spare time for this class if you want to play with editing. But I did want to talk about the different editing software that we're going to use really quick. So those are going to be Photomechanic, and you don't need to have any of these downloaded for this session necessarily, just something to look into after. If you see me demo the software and you're like, ooh, I like that, here's how you can get it. So the link is in the chat. But Photomechanic is a culling software with no render lag. So what that means is if you are going through your photos and you're importing them in Lightroom and you're noticing they're really pixely and then they come in clear, but they're pixely for a few seconds, that's the photo rendering. Adobe Bridge is another culling software, but even Bridge has some lag. So Photomechanic, I've been using it for, I don't know, like 7 years now, since I was like just a baby photographer in college. My photo editor at the student newspaper recommended Photomechanic to me, and he showed me how to get it, and it completely changed my life. So Photomechanic, there's a student discount for it, or if you're like a teacher, professor, an education person of any kind, you can get a 40% off discount to Photomechanic. So that's the link that I put there, is how to get that. The next bit of software is the Topaz Photo AI suite. What this is it's an AI denoising suite. It also has Sharpen AI, which is really sick. It's not necessarily incorporated today, but if anybody wants me to show them how to use it after the class, go ahead and just reach out to me personally. What Sharpen AI can do is if you miss focus on a photo, Sharpen AI can bring it back. So that's really freaking cool. It saved my life so many times. Um, and then Photo AI or Denoise AI does what it says. It gets rid of the noise in your photos, so it does allow you to shoot at higher ISO values, and without having to like compensate that much. And then, you've probably heard of Lightroom and Photoshop, but I put free trial links to Topaz, Lightroom, and Photoshop in the chat. And so if you don't have these software, you can try a free trial if you want to follow along here, or on your own time after class. And so for Lightroom, it's essentially a batch photo editor. I use Lightroom Classic. A lot of people use Lightroom CC. The reason I use Lightroom Classic is because I think that the interface of it is more professional. To me, as someone who's been using it my entire career, it's more intuitive than the newer just Lightroom CC. The downside is though is it's meant for desktop editing, so you can't do mobile editing on your phone with Lightroom Classic. But overall, I find it to be a more industry standard professional software than a more consumer grade Lightroom CC or Creative Cloud Lightroom. And then the last thing I have on here is Photoshop, just whatever your most recent up-to-date version of Photoshop is. The new generative AI is something that I use not to conjure things out of nowhere, but to like, be able, if there's dust scratches or like, a pole coming out of someone's head, can really quickly just Photoshop it out of there and make a photo so much cleaner. So those are the softwares. I'm going to let anybody who wants to download the raw photos for this go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and switch gears over to my desktop for the actual editing. Give me 1 second here. Okay. We should be good here. Yes, it looks like you guys can all see my whole desktop. That's great. So This is really exciting. I've been looking forward to this particular part of the session for a minute now. And I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that we're all good here. Yep, okay. So this is essentially going to be an editing workflow. Oop, 1 second, guys. So sorry. This is my first time doing this screen setup in my new office, and so I'm still working out the kinks. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Everything seems to be in order. So what we have here is we're going to do the editing workflow start to finish, assuming we just finished a photo shoot. So what I have done is I'm actually sitting on a little nest egg of photos that I took for fun on a press pass that I've never edited before. And so we're going to edit them together. And so essentially what I would do is when I put my SD card into my laptop, just pretend this folder here is my SD card. I'm going to pull that into Photo Mechanic, which again is our culling software. I don't want to update. And from Photo Mechanic, you can see, I'll make that big too. I can go from image to image to image, and they're already rendered. They're already clear, crisp, no pixelation, no lag. You can see how fast that can go. Another cool part about Photo Mechanic is you can use the numbers on your keyboard to do different color ratings. So you can see up here, I just turned it red, yellow, green. You can do the whole rainbow, right? Press 0 to bring it back to nothing. And so how I cull on Photo Mechanic, some people might use the star system. I think the color system is great. It's essentially the same thing. I see the color a lot quicker than I see a star, because the stars are appearing right here, and you can see they're not as flashy as having a bright red or a bright blue. But basically, when I import my images from my SD card, I'm flagging the ones, and I'm just kind of doing this randomly, that I want to pull in for editing. And so what I'm going to do right now, and this might take, a few minutes. I'm going to be conscious of people's time and not go like too deep into the nitty gritty of it. But I do have some photos here that I have intentionally left in the shoot to show you like why I would have chosen one over another. So for example, I had these shots and I thought, oh, like cool, like, the lights are pretty and whatnot. But then I noticed that the core members of ODESZA are literally not even on the stage yet. And so obviously, like, we're not going to shoot with, or we're not going to edit or send that to anybody because the actual act that we're there to photograph isn't even in the picture. So I can just ignore all these. I kept this one around because, I thought it could be kind of a fun shot, though it's definitely not the best one in the bunch. So now we have this photo. And essentially, the framing is exactly the same as this one, just there's no visual on the screen. But now we actually have ODESZA taking the stage, and it's a really cool, powerful, high emotion moment, right, for this show. So I'm going to go ahead and you can see these two pictures are slightly different. This is the level of detail that you need to be looking at when you're culling, because the more images you allow yourself to pull into editing with, the more time you're going to spend, the more tedious it's going to get. It's going to take forever. And when you get to a level of doing this commercially, charging money for your sets, you're expected to do a rapid, same night turnaround time. You can't spend hours editing the same photo over and over again. So what I'm doing is all my time really on the front end is being spent on the cull. So you can see here, I think it's like a fan. It breaks up the line down here at the bottom on this one, and then on this one, the line is clear. So this is the image I'm gonna pick. And I'm gonna press 5, which makes it magenta. I think these are cool. I'll probably come back to these later, but I'm not gonna pull them for editing. I do like these light beams coming here. Again, here's some pyro hits. You can see up here, it tells you all of your settings. And you can see that I had aperture 2.2, and that's why these flames look like that. In a few minutes, we're gonna get to the part of the shoot where I actually had it exposed correctly, and you can see the difference. Actually, I'll just pull it up now while we're talking about it. So you can see the difference here in these. I'm at f4, so I'm not even cranked up to 8 or 11, but you can see how much more detail is in the fire here. You can see the plumes, you can see the temperature intensity in different areas of the flame. It's really detailed, and it doesn't just look like this little blob, right? Let's go back to the little blobs. So, just for editing's sake, I think like, one of these might be cool to edit. I'm not a big fan of how these kind of all go in different directions here. Don't like these big blobs, so I might go with this one or even this one because the visual on the screen is pretty neat. Maybe do this one too because I like the fire. But now, right, we get to these and it's like, whoa, okay, now the light is popping. So why would I even pick these if in the next ones there's actually light and you can see the two guys, right? And so what I've done is I've gone to these and I've pressed 0 just to deselect them because I decided I don't want them anymore. So I'm probably going to pick, tough one. Probably going to pick this image here just because the flames are a bit more well exposed and you also don't have this hand that's right here. And again, this really is the attention to detail that you need to have when you're looking through these. So here's an example that I left in here of like picking between two shots. Obviously, this one with the more intense light is better than the same shot with the less intense light. You can still both equally see the trumpet players here, but this one just has way better contrast. You can actually see the light beams. So I'll go ahead and I'll pick this one. Same deal with this one. The light is much more intense. I like this one. I think it's a good little crowd shot. You can see the difference between these two. I'm gonna pick this one. Another pyro, but you can see they're kind of blurry. I feel like I'm letting you guys on my secret sauce here. I'm like, oh, you can see I'm actually not that good. I'm just good at editing. I'm just kidding. Or maybe. I don't know. Anyway. So we're going through these. I'm like, oh, I think this one's pretty cool. I do like these. But like this is where I try to be very strict with myself, right? Because I'm not gonna go on Instagram and post these two pictures in the same post. They're way too similar. So what I'm looking for is where are the higher energies, where are the better symmetry, where's the better emotion, and just overall what's the better moment. So I kind of like this, the line. I think it's very high intensity. This one here also, but I don't think the energy is as high as this one. And then of course you have these. I think this one could be cool to edit. I think I can go darker with it. This one's a little more overexposed and it's also very similar to the other one with the line that I just picked. So we'll keep this one. But these are the questions that you need to be asking yourself. Like, what have I already picked? What's better than the next thing? I do like that little starburst. I think this could edit well. When I'm shooting, I always make sure to get some crowd photos. Don't know if any of these will turn out, but sometimes I like to pick an image just so I do pull it into an editor. Got some fan photos here. That one's nice. I kept these in because I wanted to just sort of show like some like etiquette and do's and don'ts. This is Charlie Houston, incredible performer. I'm pretty sure that's her name. Don't come at me if I'm wrong. It's like an exposed shot, but obviously, like, you know, she's making a funny face, her body's in a funny position. This is sort of what you need to be asking yourself is like, just because I got someone in focus doesn't necessarily I should edit that photo and put it on the internet. And this is one of those situations where it's like you're shooting really fast and you're just like, oh, I think I got that moment. But really, this, if I was this artist, I would not like this photo of me. You know, same thing here. Like I'm looking at Clay's face, right? And I'm just trying to see like which one is overall better because he's pointing in all three of these. But which one's the better shot? And you might think it's the closer one, but I actually think his best expression is in this further one. And let's see here. We have something in Q&A, so I'm gonna go ahead and just answer it really quick. Do you have a particular order when you start editing? Example, brightness, shadows, color grade, or just depends on the vibe? Yeah, so, you know, it really does just depend on the vibe. I work off of presets. And so when I do pull these into Lightroom and color edit, I will go over that flow. But it really depends on what that photo needs. Typically I'll go top down the list. So that does mean like exposure first, then contrast, because that's just how it's set up in Lightroom. But if I'm, you know, working on a photo and I'm like, oh, it's missing something, what do I not like about it? That's where knowledge of your editing based software comes from, because if it's maybe it has to do with, I don't like the color blue that it is, and I want the blue to be more cyan, then I know I can go and target that specific editing module within Lightroom, which I will show you all of that when we're done with the cull. But it really depends on the vibe, because some images are perfectly exposed and maybe they just need color. Some images, you know, maybe they're intentionally underexposed because you were trying to get that flame shot, right? And now you have to bring all of the shadows out. So it really depends on the vibe. But if you're working off presets, that's a really good base plate. And I don't think there's anything wrong with working off presets. All of our favorite creators have a lot of them have presets, work with presets, work with other creators' presets. Creators wouldn't put their presets online for other creators to buy if they weren't okay with them being used. And I think it's all about, you know, how you are then taking that preset, whether you bought it off of Etsy or from, you know, a major photographer, how you're then taking that and using it. Because if you, at the end of the day, if you don't know how to use Lightroom, a preset's not really going to be worth much to you, because you're not going to know how to fine tune it and really make it your own art. So I'm going to keep going here on the cull just because I want to be respectful of people's time. I think we're going to try to, you know, cut class at, I think we do it at 6 every time, and that seems to work. But I hope I answered your question. If not, we're going to get more into it in just a few minutes. But I do want to go through here. So you can see here, there's like a much better photo of Charlie, right? And we have two different images. I'm actually not sure which one I like more. Sometimes I don't like either of them. But, you know, just for the sake of editing, I think, you know, this one might have a better exposure, but this one has a cleaner background. So maybe we'll just pick the one with the cleaner background. These are examples of photos. They're like super, super dark, but that I always pull one in to see if I can save it. And so, yeah, again, here's another example of a better exposed flame shot. And you can see here, you can really see the depth in that flame now. And that's at f6.3. So just imagine if you're at that 8 or 11, like what those puppies are looking like. So this is an example of a photo that if I were to bring this in a Lightroom, I would raise the shadows first and foremost, because the flames are exposed, but definitely nothing else in the image. And if for whatever reason you're like, Sarah, like, why are you picking that photo over that one? Just let me know. But I'm just trying to chug along here because we're editing together in real time. Another neat flame shot. Again, attention to detail. You can see the drummer's face here. They had a moving camera. That's this thing in the foreground. In the next shot, his face is blocked. So I'm going to pick the one where it's not as blocked. This is an example of a laser shot where, like, you know, here's where you have to be really tough on yourself. Yes, I got the lasers, but there's nothing else going on in this image. So as much as we want to be proud of ourselves and be like, yes, I got the laser shot. Yes, I got it exposed right, whatever. You have to remember, like, okay, but what value is there here other than that? Because there's I can't see anything in this photo other than lasers. But if we move on, suddenly I've readjusted and I've found a different angle, and now we can see the lasers and we can see ODESZA, right? And so with this one here, you can see their logo isn't lit up. So as much as I like the red, I'm probably not going to pick this because the image with the logo is just much stronger. So I'll pick that one. Here's Kusanagi. Do like these shots, but you can see this is why I blow it up on the big screen. You can see there's some slight blur right there, and he's just ever so slightly out of focus. So I'll pick these two. I think they're nice. I wanted to talk about this one real quick. Again, another thing where you just have to be hard on yourself. Yes, it's a nice shot of the violin player, but her hand's covering her face. I typically will not edit, submit, or post anything where I can't see the performer's face. You know, the cliche, the eyes are the window to the soul, whatever. It's just you lose all of the emotion and the connection that you have with the photo when you're allowing the face to be blocked. I think that one's nice. Same thing here with the face, right? I'm gonna pick this one. If this was the only photo I had to work with, I probably wouldn't submit it. So here we have this nice little pose here, this nice little moment. But in this one, even though this one's better lit, this one doesn't have any interference really with this other hand for the background. Ooh. You can kind of see I like how they're more symmetrical than the other one. Gonna pick a couple of these. And you know, sometimes differences are so small they might not even matter. Like if you're finding yourself fixating between two images that are so similar and you can't spot a reason to get rid of one and keep the other, I mean, you can just say screw it and just pick whichever one, you know, but just try to always pick one from an angle instead of the entire set. Like I think this is a much more high intensity pose than this, right? So I'd probably pick this one. Nice light on his face there. Probably take this one just because it's the same photo, but I have more to work with here if I want to work with that. I'm gonna go with this next picture over this one because you can see here in their poses, everybody's in the same frame. So even though I like the color in this one a bit more, I'm gonna go with the more purple one just because nobody's arms are cut off. Nice little crowd moment. Nice little duo laser moment. See, looking at these, I almost kind of like this because of the tension that their microphones create. I like that they're both in line. But I do also like how he's leaned forward a bit more. So this is kind of one of those situations where it's like, you know, screw it. I'm just going to pick this one and move on. The beauty of it is nobody but you is ever going to know that that other photo existed. I'm just trying to go through here, be conscious of time. But I hope that, this is helpful for you guys to see the kind of things that you should be analyzing for in your culling process before you even start with the color edits. Because the lower you can get that number, I mean, you're going to save yourself so much time on the back end. Gonna pick a couple more here. I would probably go through this shoot again later just to catch anything I missed, but for the sake of our little class here today, I just want to make sure that we end up picking the ones that we're gonna edit before class is over. So I do like these poses. I want to look for something that's like has high tension whenever I'm looking at poses. So for example, here, there's not very high tension. Yes, the flames are nice. They're more intense than the ones after it, but you can see that her pose is like, it's not really giving, So this higher tension with the arms lifting up, the legs starting to twist, this is what you want to be looking for. This is good. Good pose. I mean, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. But you can kind of see, like, you can see the starting point of my work here, and that it's far, far, far from perfect right off the bat. And the last thing I wanted to talk about here, again, is that attention to detail in all aspects. So you can see that we have this really neat shot, but over here, the performer who's featured on the video wall, she's in an in-between face. It looks like she's rolling her eyes, or, it's just not maybe the most flattering shot. You can see this next one, the one before it, and this next one are pretty pensive. So I think I'm going to pick the one right before, because I like how this light here is better than the light here. But definitely not going to pick this shot. And I think we've hit the end here. So just so everybody knows, I shot, let's see, I think this shoot as a whole was 1,700 images. So last night I went through them and I brought it back down to a manageable number to go through. You can see that number in Photo Mechanic here is right down here at the bottom. If you can see my mouse, 228 pictures is what I brought it down to. So from there, the nice thing about Photo Mechanic is you basically do like deductive culling. So now that I've flagged all the ones that I want as pink, I can click the no color one, and it gets rid of all of the ones that haven't been flagged with a color. So from there, what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm just going to quickly pick the ones that we actually want to edit for this course. And if you have a shot that you would like to see me edit, just kind of throw out a description of what you saw in the Q&A, and I'll try to pull it up and we'll try to make something cool with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a different color. So I was pressing 5 for pink. Now I'm going to press 1 for red. And again, all of the numbers are coded to a different color on the rainbow. So I'll press 1 for red, and I'm just going to very quickly go through here and select the shots that I actually want to take a crack at editing for our course here. And I am going back and forth very quickly. But that's the really cool thing about Photo Mechanic, is you can do that and you don't have to wait for the software to think about what the image is. I'm gonna try this one. Do you like the light in that one? Like the light in that one? Go with that one. This one, this one, this one. Let's do this one. Gotta go with this guy. He was so cool. So now that we've selected our ones, again, this is deductive culling, so I can now click on the pink because that was our old selection. I can click on that, and now we're left with just the ones. And so from there, and this is what I'm saying, is you can go on and on and on. And so what I try to do is, I try to per set get it down to about 50, 60 pictures. Usually never more than 100. Is just biting off way too much work per set. So we started with 1,700 pictures. I brought it down to 200 before this class. We just brought it down to 50. Now we're going to bring it down even more. So I'm going to be really tough on myself here. And we're just going to yellow flag just the ones we want for editing. I'm going to pick this one just because I want to see if we can fix it. Probably this one. Now I've made all of those red ones yellow. And again, you can go on and on and on with this, but we'll stop it there. So now if I click red, it gets rid of all the red and we're left with 18 yellow photos. And we started with 1,700. So obviously that's a big difference. That took us about 20 minutes. Going from 1,700 obviously takes a lot longer than 200. But again, Photo Mechanic, you don't have to wait for the photos to render between shots. It has a bunch of other cool functions too. Like if I were to go here, I can caption my images. I can add, you can see here, I have my name in the metadata. And what that essentially does is it protects the image from being ripped off. So if someone were to, get access to this photo, it would have my rights baked into the file. If someone tried to go make a print of it, I have my contact information in my metadata, and so a printer would actually call me on the phone to make sure that I have given consent for this image to be printed. I'm gonna take a quick sip of water. Let anybody ask any questions they want. Oh my God, I can't open my water bottle. There we go. And then we'll move on. So now that I've made my selections in Photo Mechanic, I'm going to pretend like I just picked all of these off my SD card. I'm gonna go over here, which is my hard drive that I work off of. And you'll see that I have it set up here where I have my raw photos and my edited photos in two separate folders. So each folder is organized by year, month, and shoot. And that's just like it makes it really easy to find archival stuff because you never know when you're going to go need to pull some old stuff up. It's also just a super organized way of cataloging everything. Some photographers, they'll do it by year, month, shoot, and then within the shoot they'll have their edit in their raw folders. But just the way I work, I've never had an issue with a separate editing and raw folder within my hard drive. I kind of like that all the raws are in one place, all the edits are in another. For me, just how my brain works, that's what feels the most organized. But what we would do is we would go and we would create a working raws folder. And so the working raws are just the photos that we have decided to edit. And so I went ahead and I dragged those from Photo Mechanic into this folder here, this working raws folder. Really quickly, just because I don't want to lose anything. What I did is I just copied my working raws back into the main one, just since I'm going to go back after class and edit these, take more time editing them. I just didn't want to lose any photos, but you can ignore that. So what we've done is we've pulled from Photo Mechanic, we've just simply dragged and dropped into this working raws folder. And the reason we make a working raws folder is it's going to copy those photos over to the folder, but it's not going to delete the unused ones. I never delete my unused raws until the shoot has been edited. And that's just in case, I decide, oh, maybe this one that I picked, I actually don't really like it. I want to go back to that section of the shoot and find a different one. I still have the ability to do that. But if you delete your unselected raws before you start editing, then you can't go back and do that. And so you can see here, this little file next to these pictures is just the metadata file. And so that has the color data from Photo Mechanic in it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean up. I guess my computer is bugging because it doesn't want to clean up by kind, but that's okay. We're just going to be really raunchy and select all of these one by one. Because I'm going to delete these and I'm going to show you what happens when you delete them. If I delete them and I pull them back into Photo Mechanic, you can see here that now none of that color data is here. And so, that's essentially the function of that XMP file. You can keep it, you can delete it. For my workflow, it's not necessarily important that I have it after I select the chosen RAWs that I want to work with. But if for whatever reason you do want to pop these back into the overall RAWs folder, maybe you should keep those metadata files just so you don't have to remake your selections all over again. So I'm just gonna hit Command Z and pop them all back in there. But one of the important things to note is the next software that we're about to use can't read that file. And so I have to just select the images, but not that file. So the next software that I'm going to give you a little demo of is Topaz Denoise AI. And I'm going to drag them in there. And this is just personal preference. Lightroom does now have a built-in denoise AI, but I purchased this software, so I will continue to use it. I've found that it can be much faster than Lightroom, so if time is of the essence, this is certainly what we want to be using. And you can see here, I'm not sure how detailed it's going to be on your screen, but you can see there's grain in this left side, and it's giving you a preview of what it looks like on this right side. And you can see if I move it, it's grainy, and then I let go, and it previews and it's smooth, right? So let's see if I can find another image that might have more grain. Okay, I think this is a good example. You can see on the left side here, and the whole image is up here in this right corner, but you can see on the left side all of that grain. And then here, it's just crystal clear. It's very smooth. Now, if you're finding it's like way too smooth, you can turn down the model preferences. But essentially what you want to do within this software, I select all, which means that we're selecting all of the photos I've just put into it. I select the raw AI model. And the AI model is basically how you're telling the AI to think and how to interpret these images. Because they're raw images, I want the AI to have the raw preset. From there, I just have it set to auto. That's what this little lightning bolt is, for the model preferences, which means per photo, the software is going to determine what these values need to be. And basically what happens when I press save is it's going to eliminate all of the noise from these photos. So if you're shooting at a really high ISO, this could actually be a really good tool to sort of bring your photos and bring them back down to a more like status quo look and get rid of all of that noise. Now, having no noise can make an image feel kind of sterile. So you can always edit these parameters here to bring some noise into the image, but I typically, the way I edit, I like them to be as clear as possible. So when I hit save, it's going to give me this little dialog box. And for the sake of the workflow for this class, and again, everybody has their own workflow, I'm going to make a folder inside my working RAWs folder. And I'm going to call it ODESZA Photo AI. And when I save them, I'll do custom save location, and I'm gonna make it that folder. And I'm gonna click save, and it's gonna now, you can see it's going to process all of these images. And I have a question here, and that question is Topaz denoise better than the denoise option in Lightroom? So at the time that I purchased this software, I believe it was way better than the denoise in Lightroom. The reason that I still use it and like it so much, even though Lightroom now has one built in for free, is you can see how fast this one is going. We've already processed 6 images, and it's only been about like 30 seconds. Where when the Lightroom denoise AI was first coming out, I'm not sure about it now because I haven't tested that feature in a while. It would take minutes plus to do like one photo, and that's depending on, you know, your own computer's processing speed. And so I do like Topaz. It's not perfect. You do sometimes see some glitches in the photo. But overall, you know, if you're about to put 50 shots in a Lightroom at a time and you want to batch process all of them, I would still recommend Topaz because you can't beat how fast this is. And another thing to note too is that I'm doing this before I color edit the photo. And I think a lot of mistakes, or a mistake that a lot of people make, is that they'll denoise the photo after they color edit it. But what happens there is you're essentially tricking the AI denoiser, and it's picking up those color edits that you've done, and it could misinterpret those as noise, and you might get actually a poorer result than if you denoise the image and then apply your color edits. And if we have time here, I can show you sort of a before and after on that, maybe at the end here. But there's a show that I shot where I tested this out, and one of the images that I did color edits to and then I denoised just was still super grainy, and then I denoised one, then did color edits, and it was super smooth, very clear. So now I'm done talking, and you can see that the processing is complete here. And so again, that's why we have this order, is that's why I'm doing denoise before Lightroom. So I'm going to go ahead and quit Topaz. And just a quick little side note about that. The file it creates is a DNG. And that is a type of raw format file. It does get interpreted differently by Lightroom when it comes to color editing. So there are some discrepancies between your original raw image and how that edits versus the DNG file. And the reason that we have nested this folder within the original working RAWs folder is so that when I pull it into Lightroom, I can see both side by side and I can compare them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to pull it into Lightroom. Quit Photo Mechanic. So you can see on my sidebar here, I have the working RAWs, but then I have the subfolder, the Photo AI. And I'm going to select both of those together, and I'm going to import it into my Lightroom. So now that I've imported it into my Lightroom, I'm going to find it in my library, and it's right here. And the reason that we put the Photo AI folder inside the Working RAWs folder is now they're attached to each other, but also if I want to just look and just edit the Photo AI photos, I can do that. If I just want to look at only the denoised ones, that's what this is for. But like I said, the DNGs that it creates is that special type of raw file. It can be interpreted a bit differently when you are editing in Lightroom. And this is something I stumbled on when I was first starting to use Topaz. So what I figured out is I can put them in the same overall folder, pull that into Lightroom, And now I have them side by side. And so you can see this title at the top right here changes. I have my Denoise AI raw, and then I have just my regular raw. And if you don't know how to pull that up, I'm in Lightroom Classic and I just pressed I on my keyboard. And that's going to give me all the information for the image. So it's going to tell me the camera settings. It's going to tell me the name, the resolution, the time and date. But yeah, and so let's see here. If I wanted to bump the exposure up just by 1 on the denoise and 1 on the regular raw, you can see it is slightly different. But I think that really comes out when you get to the actual color editing. And so when we do color editing, you can see here on the side, I work off of presets, and I mentioned that earlier. And again, there's nothing wrong with working off of presets. There's a bunch of different vendors online that have presets. You can see here my little chaotic organization. I have the main ones that I use. This is a brand called Creative Turtles I just found on Etsy. Here's some that I made when I was on a team working for track and field editing. So we actually made these ones in-house. Old ones that I used to use for my brand, but still like them, still use them today. And now we just have old ones that I use for my brand that I don't use anymore. But yeah, so you can take a look at all of those. Just go online, Google like concert photography presets, see what comes up. Or, they don't even have to be concert photography specific. But again, disclaimer is I do work off of presets. And at this point in time, most of what I work off of has been modified by myself to suit my needs. So maybe I downloaded something online. I then, tailored it to how I like my images, and then I save that and I export that as a preset. But yes, never claiming other people's work as your own, I think, is the most important part when it comes to those. But again, they are a valuable resource and lots of editors use them. So when I slap my preset on here, which this is one that I do for blue, you'll notice that the exposure is very dark. So the first thing I'm going to correct is the exposure. But then I don't really like how you can kind of see the back here. You notice here the shadows are very high. So if I pull that down, it's going to bring the shadows down, but because we're in a DNG, it's going to flatten the image quite a bit. So to get rid of that flatness, I'm going to increase the contrast. And all of these settings just kind of play in tandem with each other. Same thing with highlights. I typically keep my highlights very low, but you can bring them up a bit. And that's already changing this picture quite a bit. So if you want to see before and after, you can hit the backslash on your keyboard. It should be right under your delete key. And that's going to quickly just give you a before and after. Now, the one thing that I'm noticing is this picture is a bit green. And so I'm going to counteract that by making the tint ever so slightly a little bit more pink. And one of the things that I like to do is mess with the vibrance and saturation. And you might think, oh, like this is kind of the same thing. It kind of looks like it does the same thing. So the rule of thumb is that saturation controls the intensity of all of the colors of the image, but vibrance is really only looking at the muted colors. So rather than make it like super, super blown out and over colored, your vibrance is only going to bring a pop of color to the colors that really need it. And so I like to decrease saturation and increase vibrance. And that's sort of how you get those very contrasty poppy colors. If you go down here, this is also where you can find your personal style. A lot of what I like to do is I go into here. If you're new to this module, it might look like this. And you're going to click color, you're going to go to HSL. And rather than have it just hue, just saturation, you'll click all. And then you can see all of them here. And so hue will adjust the hue of that color saturation, just the saturation, and luminance will adjust the light intensity of that color. So for example, if I decrease the luminance on blue, it's making it very dark. All the blues very dark. If I increase it, now it's bringing out that light intensity on just the blues. So one thing that I like to do with my style is my blues tend to be more on the cyan end. And so I'm going to adjust that hue and I'm going to turn it from blue to a bit more of like that cyan turquoise look. Now you can go the opposite way. You can make it purple, you can make it almost green, and you'll see here on this spectrum that a lot of the colors are kind of tied to each other. You see here yellow, on the other side of the spectrum is almost green. And with green on one end, it might be aqua, green in the middle, and then on the complete opposite end, it kind of turns into yellow. So when you're editing, and this isn't a great image to have as an example of that, but say, you take a picture and there's grass and trees in it. If you're finding that those trees like aren't really like the color isn't really doing it for you, you might need to not edit the green value, but the yellow value, because of how that software is actually reading the color of the tree. The leaves might not actually be green, so to speak, when it's interpreted digitally. And so I can get into the nitty gritty of these for days, but ultimately that's kind of where I like to leave it. I give it a little bit more contrast. We're kind of maxing out there. Clarity, depending on the situation, I'll bump this up a little bit. I'll show you a situation where I'd actually bring it down, but that's essentially like the crispness of the image, and like how much like texture and detail you're really cranking out there to see. And usually when I'm at a spot that I like color and exposure wise with a photo, and we can look at that before and after, I will go down to color grading to the split toning module. And this is maybe a little bit more advanced of a feature. The best way to learn it is to just mess with it, honestly, just experiment, find out what you like. When I edit, I like to play with the shadow and the highlight toning. And so what this does is it adds an extra layer of color to the highlights and the shadows and then the midtones if you mess with that value of the photo. And so stylistically for me, I know that I like to have shadows kind of on the greener end, and I like to lift them up just a little bit. You can see the difference there if I bring that down versus if I lift it up, you get this nice kind of like faded film look almost. And then when I have blues, my highlights, I like to either be blue to match, or I'll even make them like ever so slightly yellow, and you can see that I'm altering that on this wheel here. I like to just kind of hover in this area when it comes to blues. Make them either yellow or pink or blue again, basically. But I think for this shot, I kind of just liked how it was, so I'm gonna kind of leave it more on the bluer side of that spectrum. Again, here's our before, here's our after. I might lower the shadows just a little bit more because you can see up here, the stage says the gorge up there. I don't really want to see that. I think it takes away from the image. And so there we go. And there's a bunch of different ways to go about this. But that's our final of that one. Now, if I really wanted to go down the rabbit hole, I could make a virtual copy of it. I could reset the virtual copy. I could make it black and white with one of my black and white presets, and then I could go down a whole other level of editing there. But that's why it really helps to sort of know what your style is and what you're looking for. And it doesn't have to be set in stone. It doesn't have to be in writing. It can be something that's ever changing. But for me, what I know about my style and how I edit is that I really like cyan blues. I really like, having green shadows. And when my photo is blue, I like the highlights to be blue or orange. And you can sort of make up these little rules for yourself, that, again, you don't have to stick to them, but they will basically give way to creating your own personal style of editing. I think maybe we have time, can do like a couple more. I know I took quite a bit of time with that one, so I apologize. Let's find one that we can make a really drastic change to. So for example, I pulled this image in, it's completely dark. I just wanted to see if we could save it. So I've brought the exposure all the way up, and that's where we're at now. But I'm finding that the people are just way too pink. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go down to the selective color sliders, the HSL sliders, and I can edit just that. I've targeted the pink, which software reads as purple, and I've brought down the saturation on it. And now people have a more normal of a skin tone. They're not these super magenta looking guys here. So I've brought it down to more of a normal value. I noticed this guy's got a bit of redness in his face, so I'm gonna see if adjusting the red value will fix that at all. And another thing you can play with here, you can see I'm adjusting the hue slider, and you can see how it's changing that. I'm not gonna focus on that too much, right? But again, I do like my blues to be more on the cyan end, so we're gonna kind of make them more cyan. And we'll bring up the highlights, which are the brighter ends of the picture. And so now here's our before and after on that. And I didn't even apply a preset to this one. That one was just straight, just very, very simple edits. Again, I can go into the color slider here. I love a green or yellow shadow. Kind of put it in the middle. Lift it up a bit for that filmy look. And just give it some yellow highlights. And what the yellow highlights can do too is, like, if they're looking a little too cold in the face, highlights can help adjust the temperature of an image without having to actually adjust the temperature of an image. Because if you were to adjust the temperature here, you can see it changes the photo as a whole. But I don't necessarily want that. I just want people's faces to be a bit warmer. So I know that the faces are attached to the highlights because they're the brightest part of the image. So now I'm just gonna make that slightly yellow, slightly orange, and bring it up a bit. You can see what happens when I flatten it versus when I bring it out. You know, and if you look at this before and after, it's completely saved the photo. Again, no preset here. Just a very, very baseline, simple edit. But it's something that you could totally do without any presets. And it's just knowing how these different settings work in tandem with each other. So the last image that I want to do here, because I really like this one, I'll see what my different presets look like on it. And I'm just gonna ever so slightly tweak these values. I think the contrast is a little too much right off the bat, even though I do like high contrast when I edit. So I'm gonna bring it down. And I'm gonna bring some green into the image. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna make it less pink toned and give it a more, again, more of a filmy look. It's what I've been into lately. Bring up the exposure. And you can see here, this is where altering the clarity changes the feel of an image, because now this is low clarity, this is very dreamy. High clarity, it's very crisp, it's very intense. I don't think it matches the vibe of this moment. So if you go to low clarity, suddenly it becomes very ethereal. Same thing here. Let's do this one really quick. I think this preset works great for this shot. I'm gonna crop it in just a bit. And actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a 4:5 crop. You select that over here, because the 4:5 is what Instagram uses for vertical posting. So we have something like that. And what I want to do is I just want to make it very dreamy, very ethereal. So I'm going to lower the clarity. That flattens the highlights a bit. So I'm going to bring them back out bring some more contrast in there. I'm gonna warm this image up a bit. Make it less green. There we go. And I think we're losing some orange tones. So what I'll do is I'll bring them back through this little highlight slider. And that's how you can really use split toning to your advantage, is if you lose colors that you like through different editing processes, you can bring them back through split toning. So there's our before and after on that one. Again, I do like a lot of contrast, but let's say I really like how the colors blend more here and it's not so dark like it is on the edit. I can increase the black value, bring down the whites, bring down the highlights, bring down the exposure just a little bit. And now we have a before and after that's like a little more similar to what we started with, if you don't want too intense of a change. But at the end of the day, it's really, really just about like knowing how each of these functions work in tandem with each other. And honestly, it could be its own class. So that's why these are just demos right now. But I think my biggest advice is to really just, take those raw images in the download link and just practice with them. Definitely make use, and also, you don't have to use my pictures either. You can go and definitely shoot your own stuff, right? I would love to see what you guys do. So yeah, I think we'll stop the editing there just because I want to let people get back to their day, but I am going to finish the workflow. So once we have the photos we like, I'm going to hit P, which is going to flag as a pick the photos that I want to export. And so now I can go into this filter right here, and I can filter by just the flagged photos. And then again, if I want to go even further through my picks, I can cull it even further. I can star them by pressing 1 through 5 on my keyboard. And then I can go and I can filter by just the star ones. So remove the ones that weren't starred. From there, I'm going to go File, Export. And I'm going to go and I'm going to put them in the Edit section of my hard drive. And so I'll leave that blank right there. I've selected the file path for where I want it to go within the Edit section. And then I'll put it in the subfolder, ODESZA. And then the naming sequence is important. So I do it backwards. I do year, month, day instead of month, day, year, because when you go to sort things chronologically, the year is going to be that determining factor, right? I don't want all of the Augusts, if I'm searching for August 2024, I don't want like everything that I've shot, since 2018, 2019 to suddenly appear in my search for August. So if I'm looking for specific stuff, it's really easy to chronologize. I don't know words. Anyway, ignore me. It's really easy to put in chronological order if you do year, then month, then day. And that's going to be true for Google Drive, Dropbox, wherever you end up sorting and archiving these images. I put my Instagram handle in the file name because when these photos do eventually get sent out, I want my name to be attached to them. So not just in the metadata like we talked about earlier, but like in the actual file. So when it gets kicked around from management teams to publicists to, news outlets, whatever, my name is right there. And I can't tell you how many times working social media, I get sent photos to use and it's image 1, image 2, image 3, and there's nobody's name is attached to it. And it is harder than you think to go track down and find out who a photographer is. By the time it gets into a social media manager's hands, nobody knows who took that shot unless your name is on it. And that's why we have that. So then I just have ODESZA. So when I search for ODESZA in my computer, the file name comes up. Format for export JPEG, quality 100, and then the resolution right here I do is 300, which is print resolution quality. 72 is for web. I export everything at 300, even though it's a bigger file size, because that way for my own personal archives, if I want to print something, I don't then have to go and export it all over again. It's ready for print resolution in my own archive as is. But if you're editing these and you just want them used for a client for social media, you would go ahead and you would make that 72. It kind of removes the ability to make it a high quality print resolution, which is just another layer of protection for the rights to your images. So from there, I'll click export. You can see it runs that process up here. And then if I go into my drive, you can see both of those images are here that we chose to export. And if I wanted to go one step further, something I did kind of gloss over, I just want to show you really quick, is you can, from Lightroom, go photo, edit in Photoshop. And now this photo doesn't really need any extra photoshopping, but I'm just gonna show you, just so you can see the flow. For example, like we have this little dot up here. I can just really quickly stamp it out in Photoshop. I wouldn't normally do that for this image because I don't really think it needs it. But if you have like a pole coming out of someone's head or whatever, you can do like generative fill to remove it. It's not always accurate. Again, the AI sometimes will put in really weird things. But you see, like, it's now removed this distracting phone screen, right? So then what you would do is you would save it, and that save would automatically create a copy of itself in Lightroom. So now in Lightroom, I have the version with the lights in the phone, and now I have the version without it. And then, yeah, you would just export that as normal. I would do all of that before exporting the final Lightroom shoot. I just forgot about it for a second because we didn't have anything to really edit in Photoshop. But yeah, so that is a complete start to finish editing workflow, obviously really abridged on time. From there, whether it's Google Drive, Dropbox, WeTransfer, whatever, I would upload these images and then I would send them off to my client and I would say, you know, hey, so-and-so, here are X number of photos, X number of videos delivered within blank timeline that you have committed to delivering your photos in. And that is the start to finish editing workflow. I hope that that was helpful, beneficial. I know that was just such a little, just scrape the tip of the iceberg of Lightroom, and there's so much more I want to talk about. You know, Lightroom has a really cool feature where you can like auto mask things. So if your sky is too bright, you can create automatically mask the sky down. So only the sky is, you know, a little bit darker and more bluer and not blown out. And there's just so many rabbit holes and avenues that you can go down. But that was just a demo. Maybe in the next class, I can get a little bit more in depth if we have time there. But I really thank you guys for joining me today at Behind the Lens. And I just want to give you guys a sec to put in any last minute questions that you might have. Otherwise, I really appreciate you for tuning in today, and I will see you next time. I'm just giving a second for any questions to come in. Okay, I think we're good here. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram for anything that you may need, any questions that come up later. I'm here to be a resource for you. So thanks for tuning in.